Good morning, everyone. We're going to be in Matthew 5 and in verse 10. And it says, "Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." And then the following verse is, verse 11 says, "Blessed are you when they revile and persecute you and say all kinds of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven. For so they persecuted the prophets who were before you." So the first 7 Beatitudes kind of naturally lead into the 8th. So just as a quick review, the first one says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit." So first we have to figure out how much we need it. We need the imputed righteousness of Christ, because without it, we'll never have enough righteousness of our own to be with God the Father in heaven. So once we recognize that about ourselves, it leads to the next one naturally, which is, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted." So at that point, we're mourning for our own personal sins and for the sins of others and kind of throughout the world. So it's where our heart opens up to the idea of mourning. And then it's, "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." So again, here we are with the idea that the meek inherit the earth, which is against everything that we learn in life. So when we have a humble spirit and we act that way in our life, that's what's really going to be showing that we're children of God. So then it's, "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness." Again, there's no amount of wisdom that we're going to ask for from God that he's going to be like, "No, I'm not going to give that to you." So if we're asking him for wisdom, he's always going to give it to us. He's going to give us above and beyond what we ask for. So then we have, "Blessed are the merciful." So again, once we have that wisdom, with knowledge comes responsibility. So once we have gained more knowledge, we become merciful. We have more of a heart for other people instead of just ourselves. And then it says, "Blessed are the pure in heart." So once you're merciful and you have that room in your heart for other people, you have more of a righteousness to you, and you have more of the characteristics of God. Like as you go down through this list, like the characteristics just keep building upon each other, and it really tells you what heavenly citizens are going to look like. And it just reminds me of like a staircase as you keep getting higher and higher, or lower and lower, however you want to look at it. So then it says, "Blessed are the peacemakers," and that's what we talked about last week, which is such a task. Getting people to make peace and be peaceable is often a job that you end up being hated, and it's often a job that isn't that simple. One of the things I said last week was a lot of people like the idea of peace, but nobody wants to do anything to achieve it. And I find that to be true in everyday life, because it's a lot harder to actually try to solve an issue than to put a Band-Aid on it. So all of those lead us to the very last one. So if you're doing all those things, Jesus is telling you that you will be persecuted. Like there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. There's going to be persecution for people that are putting heaven first. And that's so much about the idea that the world values the world. It values what it tells other people to value. It values itself. So it is very different to be putting the things of Christ, the things of heaven first in your life, than it is to be concentrating on all the different things that the world tells you are important. So the more that we demonstrate these characteristics of the kingdom in our life, the more we will be persecuted by the world. And I think it's important to note that persecuted doesn't mean like persecuted, like for instance in other countries where we're going to necessarily die for our beliefs. That's not what this means. It could mean that, but more more often than not, it's going to mean that people aren't going to like you. They're going to say you're strange, you're weird. They don't value the same things you value. They're going to question the things you value and be like, oh, why is it so important to go to church? Why is it so important to read your Bible? Why do you relate everything back to the Bible? So that's part of it too. They're going to try to make you doubt what you believe and try to get you to think about the worldliness. That's exactly it. Because it doesn't make any sense to them because it has to be spiritually discerned. So no, they're just looking at you like, why are you wasting your time doing all of that? And you're like, you're actually the one wasting your time. But again, you don't know that until you have that spiritual discernment in your life. So persecution only continues to grow as the world gets further away from God. And as we live each day, the world kind of gets a little further away from God. One of the questions that I've seen a lot of people asking and talking about is, are we in end times? And I mean, no one's going to know exactly when we're in end times except the Lord himself. Just God the Father, he's going to know when we're in end times. But I think it's safe to say that each day we're getting just a little bit closer to what that looks like. Each day, people are finding new and different ways to replace God in their life with some other kind of idol or God of their own. Like technology is making it easier and easier for people to forge these relationships and put other things first. So it says, as the world gets darker, the light in believers will become even more offensive. So our light should be shining all the time, no matter what the world is doing. Like they should be able to look at us and go, you know what, they're just a little bit different. They're living their lives and putting other things first. They're putting the Lord first. So the word persecuted means to pursue or chase. I thought that was kind of interesting. It's also translated to harass, to make fun of. And let's see, it says it's a passive perfect participle. So that can be translated allow. It means you allow yourself to be persecuted. So you're willing to bear the cross for Christ's sake. So, we're going to be talked to negatively to our faces and, of course, behind our back. Just like I said the other day, how easy is it if you have a problem with someone to tell somebody else about it rather than to go to that person? I mean, sometimes people tell 2 or 3 people about it before they might go to that person with the problem. So let's see. Why will believers be persecuted? So let's see. John 3:19-20 says this. It says, now this is the basis for judging, that the light has come into the world, and people loved the darkness rather than the light, because their deeds were evil. For everyone who does evil deeds hates the light and does not come to the light, so that their deeds will not be exposed. I mean, when you think about the world and you think about the times that people go to do certain things, a lot of the things that are considered sinful, people don't do them during the daytime when everybody can see them. So they wait until it's dark. When you have almost like a protective shadow around you that people can't see exactly what you're doing, they can't figure out exactly what you're doing because you don't want what you're doing to be in the light. You want to kind of hide it from people. So when people are living in sin, they're naturally going to hate those living in righteousness. And I think that that's because we are a people of comparison. So if I see you living your life righteously, I see you, giving your life to the Lord, you're going to church, the way in which you interact with people is kind, it's loving. I see you living a life and I go, oh, wow, let me look at my life. What am I doing in my life? And you start to look at it and go, maybe those things I'm doing are wrong. So it gives you almost like a flashlight or a spotlight on the sin in your own life when you see other people doing the right thing. So it tells us to rejoice in persecution. So in Bible study, on Wednesday nights, we've been talking about rejoicing in our trials and counting them all for joy in the book of James. So here we're told again in the book of Matthew, you need to just be excited about being persecuted. Be happy about it, because it means that you're actually growing closer to the Lord. And I know that sounds so silly when you say it that way, but it means that your life is getting closer to the Lord. So we should be happy. We should go, oh, you know what? I must be living my life in a more righteous manner if more people are criticizing it. Because to criticize somebody that is putting the Lord first, I feel like that's dangerous territory. Like I don't want to walk upon that path. I don't want to be like, I'm not going to say nothing about that. I can't imagine. I feel like that's just not what I would want to be criticizing. I'm not going to get between a believer and the Lord. No, thank you. So we're not called to retaliate or return evil for evil. And we're also not called to sulk in self-pity over our persecution. So again, we're to count it as joy. And if we're talking about how terrible it is to be a believer and how awful it is to hear what people are saying about us, that probably doesn't make people think, oh, I'd really like to be a believer. I'd really like to get closer to Christ. So how is joy possible in the midst of great suffering for Christ? It shows our intimacy with God. So we're able to have that joy because we have an intimacy with God. And again, I think our comparison nature just brings us back to the point we look at other people around us and we're like, oh, I probably need to make some improvements in my life. So where it says, rejoice and be exceedingly glad in verse 12. So part of our English lesson today is they are imperative verbs in Greek. So they're actually what we would call commands. So they're commands. He's not suggesting that you rejoice and be glad. He's not, giving you the idea. It's like a command that I want you to rejoice and be glad. Like those are the options we need to rejoice and be glad. So they're holy commands from the Lord. So I think it's kind of interesting that the whole language of the Beatitudes as you read down through is very gentle. It's very soft. Like it tells you, hey, blessed are those who do this, for they shall be this. And then you get down here. So he's given you this very gentle list of things to do because that's what heavenly citizens look like. But then in verse 12, he's letting you know that these are all holy commands. So don't mistake them as mere suggestions from the Lord. So it's an act of obedience to rejoice and be happy that we are able to be persecuted in his name. So it says, joy in suffering for Christ is a result of redeemed thinking. So James 1:12 says this, happy is the one who endures testing, because when he is proven to be genuine, he will receive the crown of life that God has promised to those who loved him. Again, we just talked about this and Wednesday night, and it just lined up with this week's lesson. We need to be happy in the trials that we're experiencing because we have the Lord. So no matter what we're going through, no matter what hardship, what tragedy, what great joy we're having. So in a birth or in a death, so that we start over here with this great joy and we end over here with this great sadness. The Lord is with us from the beginning until the very end, no matter what. Like he never leaves us along the way. Like he's not going to leave us because we're in the middle of a tragic period in our life. He is still right there with us in it. So it says 10 of the 11 disciples were martyred. So these are the people that were the closest to Jesus Christ, spent like 3 years with him, really just learning, how to live their life for Christ, how to not doubt his teachings. Like, he spent a lot of love and care trying to really just shape their thinking. So imagine the closest people to Jesus Christ that have ever gotten there, like they were his inner circle. Even those people needed those moments of reassurance, those moments of like, hey, I see that you're doubting the plan, but just rest in the knowledge that I have a plan and my Father has a plan, and you're going to be okay, no matter what. So even if you're persecuted, even if you're killed in my name, you're going to be in a better place someday if you follow these commandments. So let's see. 2 Corinthians 1:3-4 says this. Blessed is the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies and God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our troubles, that we may be able to comfort those experiencing any trouble with the comfort with which we ourselves are comforted by God. I love this verse. But until this verse was kind of highlighted and pulled away by itself, I didn't see how amazing it really is. So if we have God in our lives giving us comfort during our troubled times, he's going to show us how to take that same comfort that he's giving us and give it to other people. That's probably the most awesome thing about the relationship, the personal relationship that you have with Jesus Christ. It's reciprocal between you and Christ. So whatever you give to him, you're going to get back. You're going to get just as much as you put into it. So if you're putting your whole self into it, you're going to get a whole lot more out of it. But it's also reciprocal to other people around you. So if you're having that really intimate relationship with Christ, you're going to be able to give it to other people around you, and you're going to be able to show them that Christ is working in your life, because people are going to see it, and they're going to hear it, and they're going to feel it. It's going to be evident in your life. And how awesome is it that we get to choose, like, how much of ourselves go into that. It really makes you think when you read about the characteristics of God the Father and of Christ, and how they have, like, we look at people and we look and go, okay, what's the most important trait for you in a person? Okay, like mine's loyalty. It's always going to be loyalty. It's my most favorite trait. And we all have one. And everybody's is a little different. But most of the time, if you take, like you just said, honesty. So maybe someone else's kindness. So all of the traits that we would all say are all going to be part of Christ and of God the Father. So all of them. Most of the time we go through, we look for friends, we look for people to spend our time with. And sometimes people have a couple of traits that we go, yes, I'm going to be friends with them because of this trait. But then we have God, and he has them all, like all of the traits that are good traits. And it's almost overwhelming to think, like, who has that many good traits? How do you even have that many? But it's pretty amazing to think that, like, all of that is wrapped up in one person. I think that when we seek out people with differences in us, that sometimes we have to do it on purpose. I think that you're right. I think we do tend to find people that are more like-minded with us. And I think sometimes we stray away from people that are a little different from us because we're kind of afraid to tread in those waters and talk to somebody that might not think exactly like we do. So one of the last things this guy says, and I love this, it says, though suffering is a cross to bear, it is also a crown to wear. What a catchy little phrase. Though suffering is a cross to bear, it's also a crown to wear. So whatever suffering that you experience here on earth, whatever persecution that you go through here on earth, There's a crown waiting for you in heaven. You've given your life to Christ. There's a crown waiting for you. So how awesome is it that the things that we do and the kindness that we share, if we're doing it with the right heart, there's a reward in heaven. Like, who didn't get excited about like a sticker chart in school or getting a special little prize out of a treat bag? Like, we're motivated by prizes. We're motivated by rewards. You want a kid to do something? Tell them there's a prize. I'm going to give you a sticker if you do this. I suddenly feel like I could probably do it. Like, that's how people are wired. We're competitive and we're reward driven. So I feel like there has to be something to that. The Lord knows how we work. So he's saying to us, there's going to be rewards in heaven. There's going to be more than just kind of sliding to the gate and hoping you make it through. Like, there's going to be more than that. So if you're really living your life, you know, with his imputed righteousness and trying to do what's right to the best of our ability, there's going to be rewards, and there's going to be different levels of that. So, you know, why not work toward that? Why not try to have that in our life? So the next thing it says through here, it says, believers are salt and light. Verse 13 says, you are the salt of the earth. But if salt loses its flavor, how shall it be seasoned? It is then good for nothing but to be thrown out and trampled underfoot by men. It's when our yes is yes and when our no is no, regardless of the cost. Because a lot of times, there is a price in which you would change your yes or change your no. So I think integrity is when you keep it, no matter what's at stake for you personally. And that can be a hard task. And that's why it says that these naturally lead into each other. So each one just like leads you to the next one. And I think like what you said, you can always go back up. So like maybe I'm really good at this, but I'm not so good at this. You need to go back up the steps or back down the steps and see what is it that I could do better in my life to show that I want to be a heavenly citizen, because it does make it clear that these are all characteristics of heavenly citizens. Not just some of them, not just like the first one or two, but all of them. And that's a lot. Like in those couple of lines, like it's only in verses 3 through 12, we have so much packed in there of what it looks like to be a heavenly citizen. And it's such a simple but complex instruction that we're given. So until you really dig in and look at your own life and go, what am I good at? You know, what is my strength? Am I a good peacemaker? And maybe I'm not a good peacemaker. Am I hungering and thirsting for righteousness? You know, there's so many different things where you go down through your life and you can kind of go through a checklist and go, what one of these am I excelling at? Which one am I okay at? And which one am I not even doing? And I think when you read the Bible and really spend time in the Bible, you start to really do a little bit of self-reflection. And you look at yourself and go, well, that is not a characteristic that I am showing in my life, but I should be. But boy, like you read it and you're like, hey, well, you're like, well, if we just take out that couple of chapters there, I am doing great. Doing great. But then you look back and you're like, well, not on those ones. No. Yeah, like where is my Sharpie to just get rid of those couple of lines there? Didn't want to read those. Don't want those to apply to my life. But it really is like a process where you go, you know what? I could work on that a little more. And you know what? That I'm kind of getting right, but I could get it more right. I could go a little above and beyond to get that right in my life. So yeah, we do need to count it joy because it is going to be literal proof of our relationship with Christ. So if we don't have these working in our lives, it's either evidence of Christ in our life or lack thereof. Right? Yeah, there's just so many different, ways that we can take this instruction and use it in our lives. Like you were just saying, we can absolutely use it as part of our lives now. And, sometimes you're really going to see the reward of it on earth. But, sometimes you're not. Sometimes you are going to wait. But other times you're going to see that you'll be blessed in certain ways that you won't realize are a blessing until you give that to God. So if you're not willing to give him anything to work with, he's not going to take it from you. So you give him an inch, he'll work with an inch. But you're not going to get as good of results if that's all you're giving him. If you give him this much, he's going to be like, well, I'll see what I can do with it, but that's all you're going to give me. That's all I can work with. So when he fills it up, there's no more room. I think we do a lot of that. I think that sometimes our friends help us with that. They're like, oh, you're doing a great job. Sometimes one of my favorite things lately on Facebook is people will put these statuses that I swear the only use for them is to go, I need attention. I need you to say something nice to me, please. Okay. When actually what needs to be said is not something that nice. You need to say something else in response. You need to be honest with the person and be like, I think that you keep posting these statuses because you need attention. I think that you're going about it the wrong way. But yet what we do is we get on there and go, you are so smart and beautiful and kind and great. And they might be all those things. But, obviously if you keep posting the same things or in real life saying the same things, something is missing from your life. Yeah, something is missing that you need so much validation. If you can't take praise or criticism for what it's worth and move on, something is missing. Absolutely, we need to put God first, and we need to always depend upon God's opinion of us. So who cares what the world thinks of you? Don't worry, the world doesn't even care about what other people in the world think of it, because there's always more people. There's always somebody else. But, we can go back and rely upon God's opinion or approval or whatever of us, because it's the only one that matters. But how often do we want the truth? How often do you go to someone and you go, hey, what do you think of my whatever? You can fill in the blank. And you're really wanting someone to be like, I really like when you do this, but you know what? You could work on this. How often do we want the answer? That's a hard one. When you're really asking the question and seeking an actual answer. I think it's easier to just be like, you did really great at that. You said, no, there's no room for improvement. You're pretty perfect just the way you are. I don't see any room. Oh, absolutely. It's much nicer to hear what you're good at. Who doesn't want to hear that list? And I hope it's longer than what I'm bad at. That's just how we're wired. But yes, so if we have these things working in our lives, it is absolutely going to be the validation of having Christ in our life. I think that that's a good point too. If we only point out the things that we don't like that somebody is doing or that are wrong that somebody is doing, and we never give them any credit or praise for what they are doing right, they're not going to want to do anything. They may not even want to do what they were getting right before. So we have to walk a careful line with people. Yeah, and think about hey, how do I encourage someone to do more of what they're doing good and to do less of what they're not doing good, or to help them and help mold and shape people? Because every day, the people that we spend time with the most in our lives, we're molding and shaping their thoughts, their feelings. It's just nature. That's what we're doing. Because you spend time with people, you listen to what they have to say on all different subjects, and you go, oh, I might think that too. And we shape each other with everything that we do. So with the people that we spend the most time with, that's where we have the most opportunity to make a difference in somebody's life. So we have to use those carefully and make sure we're using them the way that God would want us to. So it's crazy how you think about how much responsibility we have in everything that we say and in everything that we do. Because each little thing, like someone might remember something that you said for the rest of their life, something that you did for the rest of their life, and it's either going to be the beginning of a good memory or a bad memory. Because if it's an okay memory, there's a good chance no one's going to remember it. So we tend to group things along one of two places. So we have such a ability to impact people around us. And I don't think that that's something that is taught enough to our children of how much of an impact they really can make on the people around them from such a young age. Like sometimes all you need is a child's, the hope in their voice when they're little to make you think, oh, you know what? It might be an okay day after all. It might just be all right. So Beth just said we learn what we live. So I'm going to tell you one last story before we're done. So Jocelyn has Bell's palsy. We went right after church the other day to the emergency room, and her smile wasn't working, so it wasn't going up, and her face just looked so strange the other night before she went to bed. Never seen anything like it in my life. So we get the medicine. So we just finished the medicine Thursday. So they called me on Saturday morning. They're like, oh, hey, she has Lyme's disease too, so you need to take another 3-week antibiotic. But through all of this, so Jossie, like her mother, we love a mirror. We've never met a mirror we didn't like. We like to look in the mirror. We like to twirl in the mirror. We like to turn back and just how's my hair look? How's this look? She's her mother's child. So we always tell Jossie, how beautiful she is and how awesome she is, from the beginning. And I think she's such an example of that because nobody said anything other than her smile wasn't working. So she has been saying, she's like, I'm beautiful, even though my smile's weird right now. So none of us said that. We didn't say that you're beautiful, whether your smile's working right now or whether it's not. But because she knows that she's beautiful, and we always tell her, God made you beautiful, she goes, God made me beautiful, and I'm still beautiful. And you think, how powerful are our words? How powerful are the things that we say to our children? Because I didn't have to tell her that. She's going to be 5 in 4 days. But how powerful that the words that we've used and the things that she's heard over this time have really shaped who she is. So now I don't have to worry about her self-confidence because it's been building and building and building. And I just think that's such an awesome example of children learn what they live. So whatever you teach them, whatever you pour into them, that's what they're learning. That's what they're going to repeat. That's what they're going to think about themselves. And it's just so amazing, the power that we have with our children. Next week, we're going to be talking about believers being the salt and the light.